Welcome. You're listening to the Keeping Ashland Healthy podcast, a podcast production of the Mental Health and Recovery Board of Ashland County, Ohio. Thanks for joining us. And welcome back to another episode of Dr. Ashley and the Boss.
Morning.
Good morning, Dr. Ashley. You beat me to it. You're very quick. I think that's because maybe it's a new year.
Yes, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Exciting.
We are recording this early in January 2024.
The first podcast of the new year.
Right.
That's great.
So I don't know when folks are going to be listening to this, but this is when we're recording. So if we sound, a little loopy, maybe we're still recovering from
From the new year.
From the new year. So,
Yes.
But just to remind our listeners, we are in a series where we've talked about mental health and recovery boards in Ohio, how they were created, why they were created, what their responsibilities are. And after we did that, we are going through a series of getting to know who serves on the local Ashland County Mental Health and Recovery Board so that folks in the county have a better idea who's representing them on the board. And in studio, Dr. Ashley, we've got our planning chair, Sara Battison. Welcome, Sara.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yep. And Sara did tell us this is her first time in the studios. In fact, that's mostly the response we get from our guests because we haven't been around long enough. Everybody says, yes, this is the first time I've been here. But hopefully this will be a positive experience for you, Sara. We have appreciated you being on the board for all these many years. And I'm excited about this episode. And as we discussed, Dr. Ashley and I will go back and forth with some of our questions. So hopefully you'll be okay with that ping pong approach.
Probing questions.
Probing, deep, serious questions that
Yes.
we're asking. But in all seriousness, it's really intended to help folks in Ashland County better understand the folks that are representing them on the Mental Health and Recovery Board. So I will start by asking, because one of the points I made to the audience was that to serve on the Ashland County Board, you have to be a resident of the county. So tell folks maybe what parts of Ashland County you might live in and for how long.
I moved here a little over 35 years ago. I can't believe it's that long. It's as long as I've lived anywhere my whole life.
Wow.
And I live in northern Loudonville.
Okay.
And just enjoy living out in the country. All my neighbors are cows,
Yes.
literally.
Yeah.
And it's just peace and quiet, and
Wow.
it's
I'm
lovely
glad that
living
wasn't
there.
a disparaging comment about your neighbors.
Right.
Sarah, thank you for that clarification. Sheesh.
The ones next door are really delicious.
Oh.
I've never tasted the ones behind
Yes.
me, but
Yes.
That's funny.
So South County is represented on the board. Wanted our audience to know that because, I've heard some of our folks down in Loudonville sometimes feel as if they're not always represented.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Do you feel like you have a good sense of what's going on down in Loudonville and you bring that with you when you sit on the board?
Yes, I have a good many friends, and I'm active in other things
Yes.
in Loudonville itself, so I really do feel part of the entire county.
Excellent. And then maybe to follow up on that, how long, and again, tax in your memory, but how long have you been involved with the Mental Health and Recovery Board?
I think it's been about 7 years now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I was just looking at the role, and you're coming up at the end of your second 4-year term. So by the end of June, I think you'll have 8 years with us.
Yeah.
So it's
That's
flown
amazing.
by, I think.
It has.
Yeah.
It really has.
Well, that leads me to, I think, my most probing question, Dr. Ashley, to start with is motivation. Motivation to serve, because as I've let the listeners know, these are not paid positions. Folks don't get some big salary or any salary to serve as Mental Health and Recovery Board members. So there's got to be something that motivates, and there has been. And I think the responses we've gotten from our members so far have been just great. But tell us, maybe in our audience, a little bit, what was your motivation to serve, and not only to start serving, but to continue to almost 8 years now to serve?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was brought up, even as a child, to do service to others. So it's always been important for me to be involved in something like that. But I think what strikes me most was when my husband died. Of course, you go through very low period. But what I didn't understand was that part of what I had was depression. And I learned about that from a book called Living with Loss, and I'm sorry I can't think of the author right now. But I would get up in the morning with all these plans, and then I'd say, oh, I'm going to go take a nap. I'll do it after lunch. And after lunch, I'd take another nap. And I didn't realize that was depression until I read in his book.
Okay.
And he said, you know, as long as you can function, you're okay. And when I had something to do, a meeting to go to or something to do, I would do that. But I think, and you know, all those books that are being written about all these phases of mourning, none of them mention depression. And I think that's one of the most important to know about. So when I had the opportunity to give back to an entity that really focused in on people that had problems, whether they were long-term or short-term, I really wanted to jump at the chance to serve on this board.
No, that's great. And again, it continues the theme, Dr. Ashley, of a personal connection to the work that the board does. And I think our listeners will hear that throughout the series is the folks that serve do this because it's coming from a place usually very personal to them.
Absolutely. I think loss is one of the hardest things that we go through in life, and most of us have experienced that in one form or another. So I think probably listeners are connecting to you in that way. So our next question, if you could just tell us a little bit more about your specific role on the board. You're the Planning Committee Chair. What does that look like?
Well, it's mainly running one of our sub-meetings of the Planning Committee and looking at what are the kinds of things that we should be involved in? What's important to us? What do we want to focus on? And that's really a very important role, I think, in any institution, but especially this board.
Yep.
Absolutely. I think you're doing a great job of that in that role. So I get to do some of the most fun questions in this interview, Sarah. So I got a couple here.
It's very unfair.
She let me put a couple fun ones in there. So the first one, if you could tell us about the best gift that you ever received and why it was the best.
That was really difficult because I've just been blessed with a lovely family and just always anticipating things that I need and want. But I guess I'd have to go back to John. I think the best gift I ever received was him because we were married 2 weeks before Christmas.
Oh, that's precious.
So, of course, we only met 12 weeks before that. So, but it was just such a joy to marry him in this beautiful cathedral where we went in Cleveland at the time and went to Acapulco on our honeymoon and came back and in time for Christmas with my 2 stepchildren, and just it was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful 40 years together.
Yeah.
And you can't get a better gift than that because he left me with actually 3 of the best stepchildren anyone could ever have.
Wow.
That's amazing. Yeah, that does sound like a pretty good gift.
Right.
I didn't know John, but he sounds like a good guy.
I had the opportunity, because I've known Sarah for some time, so I did have a brief opportunity to interact with John. And again, for those that don't know, he was British,
Right.
and certainly,
Although he was very proud of his American
yes,
citizenship, and he always told everybody, I had to work harder than you did. So,
so he was well known because of his accent. You know,
His accent.
We didn't have a lot of folks in the county at the time that had a British accent, so it was always fun to listen to John when he was with Sarah in meetings. And that's one of the things I remember, Sarah. You guys were almost always together. When I saw one of you, I saw the other. That's the way it always was. Yeah.
Well, he must have been very special to have gotten you. So, okay, one more fun question before David takes over. If money were no object and you could go back in time and do anything you wanted with your life, what would that be?
this was another hard question, but John and I were supposed to permanently move to Beirut, Lebanon. Mm-hmm. And when I went over there, I got very involved in things. I was working on my PhD at the American University of Beirut and was just involved in so many things and loved living there so much. It just broke both of our hearts. We ended up getting the last plane to leave Beirut. The pilot announced just after we left that they closed the airport. But I wish I could have stayed there. I wish I could have followed along the PhD route that I was taking there, because it had to change when I came to this country, because it didn't have the kind of resources for that particular topic. I was teaching at a Hagazian college, an Armenian college in Beirut in an opposite direction. And I just had so much fun living overseas and doing all these things that I don't know how money would change the war breaking out again, unfortunately, but boy, if I could have done something with that to stop it and have lived out so many more years in Beirut, Lebanon was wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. You have such a cool history.
Yeah. Yep. So now, back to more serious matters, Sara. The board is involved with several programs and services and projects, but from your opinion, from your vantage point, what work of the board do you think most positively impacts Ashland County?
I think it's so important that we're involved in supporting, both financially and in other ways, the work that these various organizations do that are a part of our whole makeup.
So our contract partners, Appleseed,
yes,
Catholic Charities,
yes,
and ACCADA. Yep.
When John did die, the hospice had a group to help us through that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I would have done without that. And from that, I kind of got on the periphery of seeing these other groups. But it wasn't until I really got involved in the board that I could see how they actually worked and how they worked with people and the commitment. And we have the greatest people working in these various organizations that we support. And it just amazes me that for such a relatively small county population-wise, how committed they are to helping everybody in the county have a really good life. It's heartwarming.
Yeah. And I just want to emphasize that because I love that response because not everybody picks up on that. But as the listeners might recall, the way revised code is set up, mental health and recovery boards like Ashland counties, we're not allowed to provide services directly. So even though Dr. Ashley and I are both licensed counselors, we can't provide services to folks. We have to contract with licensed providers to do those services. So Appleseed, Catholic Charities, and ACCADA are the board's 3 current contract partners. And as Sara was saying, so many of the leadership in those 3 organizations have been around a long time in this county. They have a real heart for this county, and we could not work with them without great relationships. And those have been fostered over many, many years, good times, bad times, and in between times, good budgets, bad budgets, et cetera. So you're right, Sara. I think that's an important point. If the board didn't have such good relationships, working relationships with our contract partners, we would not be as effective doing the work that we're charged to do.
I think that when people are seeking help, like they're going through a hard time, they need some help, they can tell when someone genuinely cares about them and wants to help. And I think that's something that's different here in Ashland County that I've noticed. Like, people are really genuine and they really do care about the people they're helping, and that makes a big difference. And our partners have been great.
Right,
Yeah.
and you might have mentioned, or you might have noticed, I said recently at one of our partners' annual luncheons that the leadership from the 2 other contract agencies attended that. And what's so interesting about that is because technically they're competitors, right? Because they're all providing to some extent similar services, but they support each other. Not only does the board have a good working relationship, but kind of to both of your points, there's such a collegiality and a sense of community in Ashland County that these agencies actually support each other's efforts.
Absolutely.
And that's not
It's
the case.
heartwarming to see.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
being on the board, you get another sense of that, and it just makes it a joy to serve on the board.
Yeah, I think for folks that maybe have worked or experienced bigger cities, and again, there's a lot of good things about the bigger cities, I think Don Mellencamp even had a song about that. There is something different about small town rural.
It's special. It's
Ohio.
rare, I think. So.
Another question, and this is the last that I have. What do you want our listeners to know about the work of the board? Again, we do a lot of different things, but a takeaway. What do you want the listeners to know about what the board is doing?
The board, every member I've ever met on this board is so committed to make sure that these services are available to everyone, no matter what. It's not a matter of affordability or anything else. It's just these services are available, and our board is going to make sure that everybody that wants to take advantage of that board is going to have that opportunity, no matter what their circumstances are.
Yeah.
And that as they look over the leadership of the various organizations, they support the leadership because they all have such good leaders to them.
Yeah.
And so no matter what little thing you may think that is bothering you, if you really want help, it's non-judgmental, and the fact that we support these wonderful institutions are just, as I said, it's a joy to be on this board because of that.
Yeah. That's great. I appreciate your passion. Listeners might have heard a thump. That was Sara pounding the table, making her point.
Getting wild.
She almost went full Nikolai Khrushchev. She almost took off her shoe and started pounding on the table. So
That's passion, David.
Yes. No, our board members, that's what I want to focus on. Our
Yes.
board members are so passionate. And Sarah's a wonderful example. She is so passionate about the work of the board. And as an executive director, that makes my job a lot of fun, Sara. Hopefully you guys know that. You guys keep me hopping, but I love your passion. I love your commitment to this county and the work of the board. It just makes what I do a lot of fun. And I think I can speak for the rest of the staff. They like working here. They love working here because of such a great board.
And one of the themes that kind of emerged when you were talking that I noticed is like the importance of servant leadership. You are the epitome of that. And all of our board members are great. But I think that's important. A part of being a leader is being a servant. And we're all that, so.
Well, that's why you're Dr. Ashley. See, I can't say it better than her, Sara. That's why I have her on. Any final remarks before we end our podcast today with Sara Battison, who is the Planning Chair for the Mental Health and Recovery Board?
I can't emphasize enough about what joy I feel being in a county that offers such wonderful services by such caring, considerate people.
There you have it.
Thank you so much, Sara.
Yeah, I hear
been great.
Someplace special here in Ashland County.
Special.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you, and we will catch you next time with another exciting episode of Dr. Ashley and the Boss. Stay tuned to hear who we interview next. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Keeping Ashland Healthy podcast. The podcast is a production of the Mental Health and Recovery Board of Ashland County, Ohio. You can reach the board by calling 419-281-3139. Please remember that the board funds a local 24/7 crisis line through Appleseed Community Mental Health Center. It can be reached by calling 419-289-6111. That's 419-289-6111. Until next time, please join us in Keeping Ashland Healthy.